Yeah, yeah.
All right. Hold on. Let me just make sure. 3, 2. Yeah. So yours. Before I get this is everyone. This is TPC 124. This is my friend Dominic Milton Trott, author of the Drug User's Bible, my psychedelic adventurer who has done more drugs and written awesome stories and safety precautions about them and how to do them. He's been on here several times. Had a bit of a mix up the last couple times, entirely on my end, for which I apologize. But back in the saddle, hopefully back on our regularly scheduled every other week podcast because I love having him on. But so let's go back to what you're saying. Apparently, we have an EDT time zone. United States does?
Yeah, you do, according to Google, because Eastern Standard Time is 1:30, but I get a message when I search on Eastern Standard Time from Google saying most of the zone is on EDT.
EDT. Well, you know what? That's news to me, so don't worry.
Okay. Well,
And I have no idea what's going on. I still don't have any of this shit figured out. I still don't know what I'm doing, Dominic. I'm just making this thing up as I go. I have no idea what this podcast is, where it's going. It's a lot like a psychedelic trip, actually. I'm just sitting back, and it's kind of just taking different turns, and I can fight it, or I can just sit back and be like, all right, let's see where this thing goes next.
Surf the wave.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think it's daylight saving time. Does that mean anything to you?
Daylight savings time?
Yeah.
Do you guys not have daylight saving time? Is that American?
That's what it says here. It's telling you all about America.
Only America. That's
okay.
News to me, man. Well, yeah, twice a year we switch our clocks by an hour going forward and back.
Yes.
I think it used to be beneficial when like 99% of people were farmers, 300 years ago, but we just kind of never dropped it, I guess. So it's 2020, but we still, dude, all it does is fuck everyone up. There's nothing good about it.
We have the same sort of thing, but I just thought that I'd made a horrible mistake and I was an hour early.
No, it's stupid as shit, man. It's stupid as shit. But so the last time we talked, you were getting ready to go on another data gathering adventure, and you said, I remember you were like, well, there's a tiny chance that coronavirus might inhibit that, and I was like, you're probably fine. And now looking back at that, I feel so stupid for thinking that coronavirus wasn't going to take over the whole world. So now here we are, June 25th, 2020, and coronavirus is still just bitch slapping the planet. And
well, it was a trip to San Francisco to take some photographs of the epicenter of the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, and the impact of drugs. So I was looking forward to that, but Trump came along and banned the UK from entering, and we're still banned. So when and if that's going to materialise, I'm not quite sure at the moment.
You think? How do you think the world would change if we got Trump to take some psilocybin or some ayahuasca, or the president in general?
It doesn't. I mean, I think it's a tricky one, that, because there are some absolute jerks who do take psychedelics, so it doesn't necessarily change your persona. And in his case, because he's so infantile, then I'm not convinced it would. I mean, it creates ego death, but not always. With his ego, would it survive? Have the same effect? I mean, it's always tricky because I'm constantly surprised, because I expect people who take I did expect people who take psychedelics to be relatively enlightened, have a wide perspective, and be entirely reasonable about pretty much everything. And when I meet people who take psychedelics who don't fit any of that, it's a disappointment, but it's a surprise. And I sort of have a sort of feeling, because of Trump, what Trump is, completely self-centric, juvenile mentality, complete lack of empathy with the human race, then I sort of do have doubts that even the strongest psychedelic would would radically change him. Could be wrong, but I think we're pretty unlikely to actually find out.
Yeah.
But I think he'd probably be one of the exceptions.
I've often thought about that. Is his ego too big? Is he resistant to any psychedelic? And I've heard a lot of people argue the point that you're arguing. It couldn't possibly change him. But then I look at it as like, man, like that's a bold thing for us humans to say. Because what I found is the few times I've done psychedelics is after the first couple times, I thought I had a hold on it. And I was like, okay, I'm good. Yeah, psychedelics freak some people out, but not me. I can take them. And then there were a couple times where I was completely humbled. And I was like...
Yeah, I mean, there's another side to it. I mean, if it did affect him, could he actually face or live with what he's done?
Yeah. So what I think is... I think it's... Now, I don't know whether or not it would change him, but I think the idea that there isn't a psychedelic strong enough to affect him, I think that's bold for us humans to say.
It's a bold thing to say. I mean, but I mean, he is the classic in every. I've never known anybody who so lacks empathy, is as infantile, or is as everything about him is sort of horrific as a personality, really. So I've never really known anybody like that. So it's hard to see, how do you get out of that? And if it did affect him, would he be able to cope with what he saw in himself?
Yeah.
Perspective, and he saw what he'd done and who he'd been. Could he actually cope with that? Because it's pretty horrific. It's sort of rap sheet, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, whether or not he could, cope with it or internalize that and work on himself from it, I don't know that. That is specific to every individual. But whether or not a psychedelic could have an effect, I don't think there's a human in history that a decent dose of DMT or ayahuasca. It's like what Terrence McKenna said. He's talking about ayahuasca. No, he's talking about DMT, and he's like, it'll strip your ego down within 10 seconds. You're in a world of imagination, and you hear everyone in the audience laugh.
Yeah. And
then he stops and he goes, "Remember how you laughed." He goes, "There will come a moment when DMT wipes that smile right off your face." And that's how I've never done DMT, so I don't know. But I imagine even Hitler or Genghis Khan, any serial killer, I think a big enough dose of like 5 MEO, some Buvo alvarius toad, I think a big enough dose. It's like a nuclear weapon. You can build a bigger bunker, but there's a nuclear weapon that can take it out. That's how I think. It doesn't matter who it is. Can they work with that? I don't know how good they. But do you think that would change the world, though, if that was something that like world leaders had to do? That was like an inaugural rite of passage.
It definitely would, because I mean, people who are politicians tend to have, to much lesser degree than Trump. Similar traits, maybe not the infantile, maybe not the complete lack of empathy, but sort of lower levels of Trumpism in terms of ego and so on and so forth. And as you well know, people who do use high doses of psychedelics, especially the first time, do have transformational experiences. And they're usually for the better. So world leaders had to take them, and we've got a hell of a lot of bad world leaders in place at the moment. If they all had to take them, I think it would definitely have a beneficial effect. And they're enablers. I mean, in the US, it's not just Trump. I think sort of Republican Party enablers know exactly what he's doing and what he is, and they're happy to go along with it. And they've obviously got serious psychopathic problems, if you like, themselves to actually support that. So if you could actually mass dose these people with or without their knowledge,
that's tricky, because I think part of the psychedelic transformation, I think part of it comes from you choose to do it. I'm choosing to take this drug. I think if you were dosed, I don't know if it would have the same effect, because I think a huge part of it is you.
I think it can. I mean, I've mentioned salvia divinorum as a sort of transformative drug, and that's not really a psychedelic. It's more of a delirium, hallucinogenic.
I'm still never going to do it.
Yeah. And it was awful. And at the time, I thought, this was just a nightmare. I just didn't think there was any positive outcome from the experience. But it's only after a lengthy period of time that I actually realised that the very fact that I've been somewhere else and come back had some sort of long-term effect on my personality. So I think, if they were force-fed it, or if they were surreptitiously dosed, I think it would have an effect. I think it would have a beneficial effect.
I've thought about that a lot. Might as wave to the NSA or FBI, whoever's listening in, talking about mass dosing people, but I've often thought
just
about
Republicans.
No, I think everyone.
Yeah, I'm only joking.
Yeah, and I know. That's why I love you, Dominic. I think everyone's got to take it, because, not to quote Harry Potter, but there is I'm gonna butcher it, but isn't there a quote from there that's like, those who want power shouldn't have it, or anyone who wants power is not fit to have it. So I think any governor, Republican, Democrat, communist, libertarian, I think anyone who seeks out that position of, and obviously there are exceptions. There are wonderful people in the world who have gone out because they want.
It's why do you want the power? I mean,
if it's like a Gandhi figure, he went out and got a lot of followers, and it was good. But anyone that wants that throne, that senator seat, that Congress seat, that parliament seat, anyone who wants it, there is a little hesitance I have. It's like, why can't you get your point across just talking? Why do you need this?
Well, because you get the platform that goes with the position.
Sure.
I mean, the only reason I'd want a sort of position of power would be to exercise the power positively.
Sure.
Not for me, but for the benefit of society, for people generally.
Yeah.
So I think there are people like that. I don't think there are any Republicans like that, but I think there are people like that across the political spectrum, apart from the sort of enabling wing of the Republican Party, who do want to exercise power for the benefit of others, and they realise that the structures in place, the framework, requires the individual to take positions of power to exercise the power for everybody else. So there is that, but you're right in that, it's quite evident that, a substantial proportion of people in powerful positions are at least in part there for their own benefit, for their own ego.
There is some ego in there.
Yes, and that's the problem. I mean, we're seeing we're seeing sort of extreme edge of that with Trump and Johnson and the guy in Brazil and so on, at the moment. But, it's degrees, isn't it? You're going to have a lot of people in powerful positions are going to have a degree of that, and some are going to have a low degree, a small amount. Some are going to have a lot. You have to have a few leaders in position who have an extremely large amount of that. So it depends on the individual. But generally the question is with respect to psychedelics. I mean, it definitely would have a beneficial effect if anyone in any senior position of power had to have a psychedelic experience. It could only be positive, in my opinion.
Yeah, there seems to be almost like catch-22, though. It's like there are a lot of good people that want to go out there and enact change, and the way society is set up is we have these positions of power that you can be voted in for, you can run for, and you can enact your change. But it's like, to get to that position often requires a certain cutthroat nature.
That's the more pressing question, I think, in that You know, the structural hierarchies, like corporate hierarchies.
No, yeah,
and it actually creates a situation where you have to be self-centered, ruthless,
you know,
all those attributes or non-attributes that
are
required to climb a ladder at the expense of other people. You know, which is, you know, conversely, if you're there to serve other people and help other people, maybe you're not really inclined to squash other people on your way to the top of the ladder. So that will have an influence on the sort of people that you get at the top of the ladder, and tend them towards being egotistic, ruthless, conniving, self-centric, egomaniacs in some cases.
Yeah, it's like the strongest, most evolutionarily fit, and fit in I don't mean just that physically, I mean the actual genetic term for fitness, and it's the highest percentage of an animal or an organism's offspring that survive to an age in which they can produce offspring. So basically it's the number of grandkids you have that is the genetic definition of fitness. I may be rusty.
Yeah.
So, that being said, the most fit shark or the most fit bird or the most fit dog, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the cutest or fluffiest. It often means it's got the biggest teeth, the biggest claws, it draws the most blood. It's an odd, but so I've thought about that a lot over the years, is how do we enact change in a system that selects for psychopathic tendencies and backstabbing tendencies? And I've come to the conclusion, in my limited knowledge and experience, that you would have to do a global, and I'm probably going to lose half the people listening now, you would have to do a global psychedelic spike. You'd have to hit, and I've thought about this. I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy, and I am. But
no. I mean, I'm not.
You got to do, hear me out. You have to give everyone psychedelics, and it has to be at the same time. So I've thought about this, because if you gave it to, let's say you gave it to everyone in America and everyone in the Pentagon, right? And let's just say Trump, every general, every ruthless, whatever. Let's say everyone became peace and love overnight, right? Great. Mm-hmm. But what if you didn't give it to everyone in Russia? Well, now you have this country that's become peace-loving overnight, and we put down our guns. But now another alpha society comes in, and now they just crush us, and we didn't get anywhere. So you got to do it at the same time. It's like a military operation. You'd have to drug the entire world at the same time, so everyone had that revelation simultaneously. And you may be thinking, that's the craziest fucking thing I've ever heard. But if that is what I think could cause world peace, what is the alternative? Right now, the alternative is what causes world peace? Nuclear missiles pointed at every country at all times, mutually assured destruction. So I don't think giving everyone acid at the same time is any less crazy than pointing nuclear weapons.
It's not, I mean, I agree, actually do agree broadly with what you're saying there. I don't necessarily think you need to give it them at the same time, though.
Okay.
Because simply because, let's say you gave it to pick a country, I don't know, say it's yours, USA, say you gave the Senate and the House and the White House and the rest of them strong psychedelic experiences, and it was transformational for most of them. Just because you transform doesn't make you a servile, weak doormat for other parties.
Okay.
Just as you go out, you're not sort of meek and mellow with everyone you meet. You're still capable of functioning in this society as it is. You know, it's not a very friendly society in some respect, but you can capable, even though you might be enlightened and you've had psychedelics and you're generally benign, you're still capable of managing a hostile environment.
Okay.
So I think if you did sort of dose psychedelics on all the powerful people of the United States, it wouldn't necessarily be it wouldn't necessarily weaken the United States in a confrontational sense with Russia or China, because rational decisions can still be made when you're enlightened.
I never thought about that, and you're completely correct. Again, Terrence McKenna, didn't he once say, he was like, he's like, be enlightened, meditate, smoke pot, but he was like, pack heat if you gotta. He's like, have a shotgun if you have to. He's like, the world is still dangerous, and I didn't think about that. That is, you can still be. You're right. It's more so that now you have the option. You are now open to, I guess, more.
I think also that you've got all the other benefits of having had the psychedelics, like you've seen this reality from outside, from a different perspective. You would be better positioned in some way for dealing with a sort of Russia or China or potential adversary, because you'd be able to look at it from a sort of more macro perspective than if it's a sort of, these guys are limited in terms of how the brains function. That's, frankly, in that it's all linear, and there are enemies, and there's not a lot of out of the box thinking in terms of the sort of dynamics between. There doesn't seem to be anyway. And then, if once you've had a psychedelic, for most people at least, I believe, they would be capable of managing that relationship from a different perspective as well. So perhaps they'd be able to manage Russia or other adversaries more, cleverly, if you like, and make a better job of it.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's one thing I've thought of a lot is, so obviously there are, well, not obvious to most people, but there are a lot of psychedelics being used in the very early stages of therapy, namely for soldiers with PTSD, people who survived childhood trauma, rape, sexual abuse, physical abuse. Let's say that it gets passed, and Big Pharma gets their greedy little fingers in it, and they sell it for $1,000 a pill, whatever. Well, just like you can go on to really any, I went to a huge college. You can go out on any day to really anywhere. And if you wanted to, and you had money, you could get Adderall, you could get painkillers, you could get Xanax. If you wanted to, you can find it, even though you don't have a prescription. If you have money, someone's willing to sell. Do you think that if psychedelics could become legal as therapeutic drugs, so just like you could have, you go to the pharmacy store, the drugstore, you pick up your Zoloft or whatever. What if these start becoming prescribed drugs, and then, just like Xanax or Oxycontin, people can go out on the street and you buy it from someone? But now, what if more people are now experimenting with psychedelics? Do you think that would start to flood society and have a ground level change? Or, on that same train of thought, what happens if maybe you don't need to get everyone? What happens if 1 or 2 billionaires with a lot of influence, an Elon Musk, a Bill Gates, what happens if they're at some party on some yacht with a bunch of other billionaires, and instead of doing the normal whatever, coke, liquor, they decide to drop some LSD? What happens when one of them has a life-changing experience? Does that have a trickle-down effect on everything that they control? Or am I just spewing some hippie?
Well, you don't need to target it, because it's sort of, by definition, if a large number of people take this stuff, you're going to get some powerful people, and you're going to get a lot of non-powerful people.
Yeah.
Guys like the first wave of the psychedelic revolution was in the 60s. It was based in San Francisco, where I was.
Yeah.
I was going. And I don't believe, and this is a unique thought, by the way, I don't believe that the emergence of Silicon Valley in the same region of the world was unconnected. Because, it had an effect on culture and society everywhere it was used. Music was obviously a massive effect with the Beatles and the change of music, but it had an effect in California with the emergence. But Steve Jobs had LSD, and so it affects everybody who takes it to some degree or another, and it changes a lot of attitudes it widens perspective. It has a hell of a lot of positives, and it's whoever you are. It doesn't sort of pick people based upon, blood type or anything like that. It's so rich, poor, or super wealthy. It doesn't matter. So I think a large number of people, if it's prescribed or just more commonly available, it's going to get some powerful people who are going to be transformed for the better. So I don't think it generally doesn't have to be targeted to have a social influence. I think that takes care of itself, as it did in the 60s. It just got stopped too quickly.
It did. They stomped it out. They saw it going. They were like, "Shut this shit down. This is undermining the system. Shut it down."
They saw it coming, and they stopped it, not because of some benign president or politician deciding this is a risk to our people, for population. It was a risk to him.
It was a risk to the power structure.
Risk to them, not to the people. So
shut it down. Shut it down.
Created a war on people as a result of it, which we're still suffering from today.
It's like, again, what Terence McKenna said. He was like, the government doesn't want you to take psychedelics, not because there's some loving overseer who is afraid or is worried about your health, or that you're going to jump out of a 4th-story window trying to fly. They don't want you taking it because it would dissolve the power structures before your eyes, and you'll realize society is upside down. It's paraphrasing. I don't think I got it right. But
it's broadly what he said, and he was right. That's exactly why it was classified, and they created the war on drugs. And there's a quote which I've quoted on the previous one of your podcasts from Anmcc or someone like that, saying the war on drugs was created to target the hippies and target the blacks. That's his quote.
100%. 100%
That's what he called them, and that was political for both reasons, and it was the anti-Vietnam demonstrations, and it was the racism of the Republicans again. Sorry if this is political, but it's not to me.
No, it's part of life.
So it was intentionally started for political reasons, not for health and safety reasons.
Yeah. I just let me pause this. I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. Sorry.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
No problem. I'll talk to you people whilst he's gone to the bathroom. What shall I talk about? Give me an idea. I'll tell you where I am. I'm in England, and it's one of those rare days in England where it's not raining and it's really warm. Really warm for me is 30 degrees, 29 degrees. It's really hot. I can't cope with it anymore. That's why my face is probably red, and I'm sweating, and it's really hard. So it's one of those rare days, and I've been sitting here waiting for this to start, thinking I'm roasting in an oven here, and I don't know if I can survive very long. But I'll try and keep going. So that's just a ramble. What else should I talk to you about? What I'll suggest when he comes back is because we've just been talking about politics, is I did an article extract from the book on the media. And I'm going to repeat this probably in a minute, so I'll do a slight summary of it now. Because I think the media is a one of the major weapons of the war on drugs, of those who were fighting us, the people, with the war on drugs. And not enough attention, in my opinion, is paid to the role of the media as a sort of military force, if you like, in fighting this war against people like me who choose what to do with my own consciousness. What the later editions of the Drug User's Bible, of the book, I had in the early editions, I had this segment in the back whining about, it was really whining about the media and how terrible this is, and that's all propaganda, which we all know. For later editions, I actually changed that segment to bounced it on its head because nobody wants to hear me whining. I'll create a code of ethics for honest drug reporting.
Yeah.
And I think by actually explaining to a journalist and sort of hypothetical journalists, this is how you should report. That in itself is explaining simultaneously how it's not reported now and what the problems are.
Yeah.
So I created this code of ethics of 10 points, which I felt, if you're an honest journalist and a decent guy, why aren't you doing this already? And if you're not doing it, look at yourself. And I'm afraid saying, well, it's the boss says so, that didn't really work in the Nuremberg trials. Germany, at some point, you journalists have got to take responsibility for what you're writing. So I had this in mind. So I thought, well, I had an opportunity to change the book when it was reprinted. So I swapped that old whining, isn't it terrible, into a more proactive, So I thought I could go through those 10.
Oh, sure.
Sort of aligns with the sort of political discussion we've just had.
Let's do it. Let's jump. Yeah, because you're right. Nobody likes just whining.
No.
And that goes for, and I'm the most guilty of it, because anyone can sit back and point out what's wrong with the world. That doesn't take anything. That doesn't make you, if I'm like, the banks are too greedy and the capitalists are bad and the Republicans are racist and the leftists are cancel culture and global warming and blah, blah. It's like anyone can point that out. That doesn't make me special. Can you provide a proactive game plan to fight it and to fix it in a peaceful and effective way? Well, if you can't, you're right. Then you're just whining, and I'm guilty of that. So
everybody likes whining.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't like bitching? Who doesn't
really add much value?
Yeah, who doesn't like everything's wrong? This sucks. Yeah, who doesn't like that?
It's a bit like that. The rest of the book is proactive in that it's giving information on how not to die, really. And it was just this section, and sort of under welfare of, it's not just health and safety. It's just those sections of welfare and how to pass a drug test and so on. And part of it was don't get arrested, and if you do get arrested, and I hate the media bit, and it's the only bit in the book that I felt, that's not really adding anything. It's just telling people that the media suck.
Yeah,
and that they're not your friends.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty obvious that the mainstream media aren't your friends anyway. So I thought I'd change it round, and I came up with these 10. So I'm going to go through them one through 10, and because I think each code, the counter is what I was whining about in the original copies of the book. And the first one is Code of Ethics for Honest Drug Reporting. The first one is the cause of tragedy and death is the erroneous use of drugs within the context of punitive drug policy, not the drugs themselves. This usually stems from a lack of safety awareness and knowledge with respect to the specific drug or drugs in question. Reports should therefore be framed in this context. So it's basically saying, look, it's not the drugs that are bad. It's not drugs that are not killing people. It's how they're using the drugs.
Yeah.
It's like saying, right, we're going to ban bread knives because some guys have been killing themselves with bread knives. Well, no, it's not. It's not the bread knife. We need that for cutting bread.
Yeah.
It's not this. It's and people throw themselves off the building, so we can't have tall buildings. There's some other problem there.
Yeah.
In the case of drugs, it's are you going to ban aspirins? Are you going to ban because people kill themselves with aspirins? It's not the substance. It's that people are using it in the wrong way. They don't know what they're doing. They're making all the mistakes that we cover in the rest of the book, and that's exacerbated by the media. Drugs did this, and drugs did that, and drugs are bad, and the use of drugs. The words I used is the erroneous use of drugs within the context of a punitive drug policy, not the drugs themselves. So if you're a journalist, have that in mind. That's the context. Don't take the easy route and say, this guy died of drugs. Bloody drugs again. Aren't drugs terrible? No. There was another reason why he died.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the fact that this drug exists. It's there. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So that was number one. Number two was always include the intrinsic and central details in reports, because reports, you know, 90% of reports of drug tragedy, they're the same. They say the same things. Just to change the names and swap a few things around. So, for example, don't routinely use the generic word drugs to discover substances which are absolutely diverse in nature, effect, and potential harm. This wide-scale practice is a de facto inhibitor of accuracy, education, and understanding. So when you've got as a journalist, when you've got a situation to report, and if it's a tragedy, then take the trouble to actually report what has happened. You know, you're a reporter, you're a journalist, so do journalism. This guy had MDMA, and it looks like he had too great a dose of MDMA. MDMA is an empathogen, but it has da. So, you know, do journalism, you know, explain, don't use generic terms for all drugs, because they're completely different. You know, the array of drugs, psychedelic is absolutely nothing like heroin. And can't be more, you know, different, really. And a stimulant is totally different. You know, so, you know, so please be granular. You know, actually report the intrinsic details of the news, and not the sort of lazy-arsed, you know, drugs are bad. These drugs did this and it, you know, give a report, do your job.
Yeah, it's like saying someone died from sickness.
Like, exactly right. Exactly the same thing. This guy got sick. Well, what did he die of? Sickness.
Yeah. Was he malnourished? Was he in a prison camp? Was he just 95 and just got old? Like, what is it?
What was the illness? I mean, they get away with it with drug reporting. That's the problem.
Sickness. It's the war on sickness. It's like, what? Well, what happened? He died in a car crash. Was he drunk? Did he get hit by someone else? Was he blind? Or was there a malfunction in the car?
Exactly. They wouldn't think of reporting like this for most other scenarios, but they do for drugs.
He died from drugs.
And I think it's partly laziness that they can't be bothered actually doing the job properly and learning that, oh, well, it was this drug. I don't know anything about that drug. Well, you're learning your job. You know, drugs are a major part of society, and you're reporting on society. So do some journalism. Number 3. This is quite a lengthy one, but it's an important one because this happens every day. Cultural bias tends to suppress awareness of relative harms, which in Western society severely exacerbates alcohol-related problems and misrepresents far more benign options. Let's see what's coming here. Effort should be made to reduce and eliminate this tendency. Specifically, alcohol is a hard addictive drug and should be cited and reported as such when appropriate. Do not hesitate to cast this drug, alcohol, in the comparative context of other drugs when reporting it, and vice versa. Within this, review the use of stilted terminology. For instance, why do alcohol users drink their drug, whilst users of other drugs abuse theirs? Why do alcohol sources sell their product, while sources of other drugs push their product? So we have this bizarre landscape of sort of self-censorship, really, where there's alcohol's running rampant, causing addiction, killing people. Some of the drugs are to a lesser extent, that's a true statement, and some other drugs are not having any sort of detrimental effects, or hardly any detrimental effects at all. So you've got this landscape of different effects. Now, how many reports do you see of alcoholism and alcohol-related this and alcohol-related that, or even heroin, and that actually relates these issues to other drugs that exist? And how many reports actually ever cite alcohol as a drug? But this is real. This is factual. You are a reporter, guy. You know, you report truth to the public. That's your job. Yet you're not doing that because you're omitting all this vital contextual information, which makes your report propagandistic, always. Because, you know, something happening if something terrible happened with heroin, they'd be all over how terrible it was. how it's addictive, how many people are dying because of it. We've got this huge problem. All of it be all over you. They'd be slapping you in the face with this stuff. If you're out with alcohol, they're not. Hardly at all. It's funny when somebody's totally intoxicated.
Yeah, totally. When they're so fucked up, they're vomiting and they're
yo, Fred's had too much to drink,
spring break.
And then he went and bumped the car and whatever. And then you've got other drugs which are absolutely benign in comparison. Yeah, they're reporting it in a manner which is totally unrepresentative of the reality. Yeah. And then the relative harms and the relativity of these drugs in terms of what they're doing to society. Yeah. Just stop doing that. Stop saying drug pusher if you're not going to say alcohol pusher.
Yeah. It's
stop demonizing a benign substance when you're treating alcohol in your reports as though it's jolly. Everyone does this, jolly good, no problem here, nothing to see here, folks. Just report without cultural bias, because this is what you do. I mean, they're not necessarily doing this on purpose because they're the recipients of propaganda as we are, but they've got to recognise they're doing this. They're actually implementing and supporting and continuing the cultural bias that we've had for a long, long time, and it's part of the problem. It's part of the problem. It's part of the reason so many people are dying of alcoholism and other overdose issues with other drugs, because of this sort of lack of sort of self-reflection on journalists to understand when they're reporting alcohol and drugs that they actually should report it without the cultural bias that is ingrained in themselves.
Yeah.
That's number 3. Okay, number 4. I haven't read this myself for ages. So, in the context of drug use, the mantra "ignorance kills, education saves lives" is a statement of fact. Journalists can help to educate by reporting harm reduction and safety information whenever an opportunity is presented. We routinely quote harm reduction charities such as Release and Dance Safe, and directly recycle the personal safety data provided by sources such as TripSit and the Drug Users Bible. So, when you're reporting on suicide, certainly in this country, it's normal for a little tagline at the bottom. If you're having suicidal thoughts, contact the Samaritans, or and when AIDS was in full whack at the start of the century, whenever it was, you'd have little taglines to sort of advise people, almost public service announcements at the end of reports. Why aren't you doing that with drugs?
I mean, you do have, in America, you'll have those commercials, but it's always at like 3 a.m. and
we don't want that. We want when you're reporting for a mainline media, whatever it is, the newspaper or on television, treat it as you would treat suicide. Yeah. Because people are dying here.
Yeah.
And have the tagline, where to go for help if you've got a drug issue, or you're using drugs and you don't know what you're doing, or you're addicted. Get those taglines in there as routine. They're doing it for other social issues, but I don't see it for drugs.
Yeah.
So that's number 4. Just do it. Number 5 is, there's only 8 of them actually, not 10. So it is a long time since I've read the book. The police frequently inflate the market value of their drug holes for self-interest, and defendant solicitors will commonly consider it trite or provocative to challenge this in court. This misinformation perverts the course of justice and serves to reinforce the destructive narratives of the war on drugs. When reporting, qualify police claims or independently research the actual value. Time and time again, I've seen this. You just take the word of the police. When they've seized some drugs, even if it's just cannabis, 5 plants with a market value of $10 billion or dollars. And they make every seizure into a massive big deal. And I'm looking at it sometimes thinking, hang on a minute, this is a guy growing a couple of pot plants at home.
Yeah.
And they make him sound like Al Capone.
Yeah.
Because the police have inflated the amount. They do it by market value. They don't say, "Oh, 2 plants." Two plants in his back garden, or any, or they don't say, "Oh, just a little baggie of they'll somehow convert that to a sort of market value, and then multiply it by 10 or something like that. So you look at the market value and think that absolutely bears. Why aren't you telling us what it is and how much is there? You're not telling us what the seizure was, unless it's a sort of major importation. The day-to-day arrest that's still all over the papers. You're not telling us what the weight of it is, the purity, or even sometimes what it really is. You're just giving us a market value to make this guy seem like he's a major league player. And quite clearly he isn't. He's just a guy who uses
dude. He's just a dude selling pot.
If you're journalists, do journalism. Qualify. Don't just take the police figure and then reproduce it. That's not doing journalism.
And
that's acting as a spokesman for a party whose interest is stilted in favour of perpetuating and exaggerating the situation. So stop doing that and start doing some journalism. In other words, you investigate. You ask the police, how much is there? What is it? Is it pure? Blah blah blah. And then you go and do your own market research. Go head over to the dark net and see what the actual market value of this stuff is. It's 5 minutes to actually produce accurately, rather than taking the ridiculous figures that quite often the law enforcement agencies will give out for their own what they see as their own benefit. And that's perverting the course of justice, because it's just, the guy's going to get locked up, and it's just outrageous half the time. So number 5. Do some journalism and don't just requote the police.
I was gonna say, and it certainly doesn't help your cause if you're taking a picture of a couple bricks of pot and you're like $10 million street value. Well, guess what, man? Now every motherfucker who makes $40,000 a year working 80 hours a week, they're going, how much is that worth? Like, shit, that's 10 million. Fuck it, I'm gonna start growing.
They're very shifty in how they do this, aren't they? You have to sort of look again and work it out.
If I see someone with a baggie and they're like, this is $10 million street value, well, why the hell am I doing my job if that's $10 million? You're not making this look bad. There's a lot of people who can't make ends meet, and they're like, how much is that worth? I can sell that?
They're playing to a gallery, and their gallery aren't the people who actually use the drugs. They're the people who will believe any shit that comes out of the mouth.
It's marijuana. It's killing our nation. Oh, God.
That's the problem. And they want to believe that, they got a guy, he had and they haven't got a clue this is going on half the time. Most of them, they actually think that, it must be a big deal. It's worth $50,000. This guy, and scratch the surface, it's probably worth $1,000.
Meanwhile,
probably for him and his mates, and but they don't know because the media aren't doing the job properly.
And meanwhile, you're busting these, and we're like, we caught this car with $1 million of weed in it. Meanwhile, on any given moment, there's 100,000 tractor trailers on the highways full of alcohol, and it's just like,
So,
I
mean, again, I'm not asking for the world. I'm just asking the journalists to do the job and stop being lazy and stop perpetuating what's going on around us by repeating and not thinking and not reporting the truth and being accurate. Number 6 is a strange one, really. I've got substances like datura and nutmeg deliriants are dysphoric and highly toxic. Don't use words like trip to describe their effects, and don't refer to them as psychedelics. This is a good example of misleading terminology inciting potentially fatal consequences. The reason I put that in as a separate one, I mean, it almost fits under the, if you're reporting on drugs, find out what the drug was and report something on the drug. And be accurate. It falls under that, really, but I'll take that out because a number of times I've seen deliriants and the word trip in a mainstream media report. You put the word trip in a report that's seen by, say, 500,000 people. I think you're going to get 1,000 of those who want to try it. Because it's an enticing, you're going to have a trip, an exciting experience. You can do that with LSD, and you can do that with DMT, and you can do that with pure psychedelics, but don't do it with deliriums. Don't do it with nutmeg. Don't do it with datura. Again, do your job.
Yeah. Fucking nutmeg.
And I mean, the reason this sort of hit me was that I had, and I'm not going to name the newspaper because I don't think they really deserve it. I got contacted for an interview with a major newspaper. That's okay. So I gave an interview, and he asked me about Vogue, and I said, da, da, da. And I said, what's the worst drug? The worst drug experience I've had is nutmeg. So at the end of it, I'm sort of saying that I gave him this brief explanation of why it was so horrific.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, it's really important that you actually get as much of this harm reduction information into the report as possible, because you've got to leave something for people to take away that's going to be beneficial and might actually save some lives.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what he was going to cover. I warbled on and on about the 10 commandments of safer drug use and measure your dose and all the stuff. And the report was household spice can trip you or something like that.
God damn it.
Page thing, and an expert said, didn't even mention the book. I was just an expert. So, and I think it's like an advert to kids to go and poison themselves.
And it's terrible. It's a terrible experience.
It's not. It wasn't. It's not. It sounds funny, but it's not funny because, talked about irresponsible.
Yeah.
Here I had this interview with a guy trying to say, look, if they just do these 10 things, it's going to have an effect on the numbers of fatalities if everybody knew these 10 things. Not at all interested in any of that nonsense. Just wanted to do this sensational story on, look, you can go into your cupboard at home and get high on nutmeg.
Yeah.
One of these spices in your spice rack.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So that was number 6. Again, it's back down to being a journalist and being accurate and researching your subject matter. Number 7. Now this is a 7 of 8. This is a sort of wide-ranging one, really. Report actual and factual impact data with respect to the war on drugs. So this is about the war on drugs. So, for example, with 5% of the world's population, the United States now holds 25% of the world's prison population, whilst the number of overdose deaths has soared. So you've got this war on drugs is good narrative going on, yet you got 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population, and you're dropping like flies over there because of overdose deaths. So that's working, isn't it? No. So I said, at the very least, don't repeat the war on drugs precept as though it isn't challenged. So you're not going to tell the truth about this. You're not going to tell the public and your readers that the war on drugs is an abject failure, and total disaster. If you're not going to actually be honest enough and brave enough to do that, at least don't repeat their arguments as though they're not challenged. And so within this, don't pursue a narrative which demonizes people who sell drugs. Bear in mind that 250 million people use drugs, and most sellers are ordinary citizens who started buying drugs for friends as well as for themselves. Right? So you've seen the pictures in every drug report of whenever someone's charged, they have this close-up picture of this face who they try to make up Mr. Evil, a drug seller. And, well, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Vast majority of people who sell drugs are just as normal as me and you. Well, not bad examples, maybe, but they're just normal guys who've started buying drugs for the group of friends, and because they happen to have the guy know the guy who, and they've got maybe that's it, or maybe they've got carried away a bit further, and that's it. They're just normal people. Yet they're always presented as a drug dealer, a drug pusher, as though they're forcing people to have these toxic, poisonous, and it's just complete bullshit. And they're demonized and misrepresented. And I basically said, look, stop doing that. Go and do your research and find out who drug sellers are. Instead of, again, following this lazy narrative that drugs are bad and anyone dealing with them is Mr. Evil, because that is simply not true. Your war on drugs is a disaster. and these guys are victims, just as the people who were overdosing or becoming addicted are victims.
Yeah.
Because they've been arrested under draconian laws.
Yeah.
They're misrepresented by you in the media. They're locked away and having huge portions of their lives taken off them.
Yeah. I mean, if the person dealing the drugs is a criminal, I mean, if this is someone who is just a shitty person, has robbed, has murdered,
that's a different matter.
And paint him as that. Be like, hey, this asshole. But I mean, if it's just Bob down the street who likes to wear Hawaiian shirts,
non-violent drug offenders should not be in prison.
No, yeah,
you
shouldn't. Yeah,
it's just ridiculous, and they get away with it because the media are part and parcel of the problem. They're like a sort of unit of the army fighting the people, if you like, because journalists haven't got the balls or decency or talent to do the job properly and actually report the truth. So the big picture, what a failure this is. Why don't you start reporting the facts for a change? If you haven't got the guts or the courage to do that, then at least don't demonize the people who were victims of it because they've just because they've been arrested for acquiring drugs for them and their mates.
Yeah.
And then I've got this thing that I did a quote on recently: individually to hold sovereign and exclusive ownership of one's own conscious mind, to explore freely without boundary, is surely the most fundamental of human rights. Third-party intrusion into this wholly personal territory is a grievous breach of this inalienable freedom. I've made that statement. I said it's entirely reasonable to reflect that perspective in your reports. But I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. Yeah, you're not going to see it on Fox News or any of that sort of right-wing stuff. But I've never seen it in the New York Times. I've never seen it in the Washington Post. I've never seen it on CNN. I've never seen it in any mainstream organ, that sort of perspective. Why not? Why is that? If you don't have to believe that.
Yeah.
But that's my quote. But McKenna says something similar. So lots of people believe broadly what I've said there. Yet it's a perspective that is just never ever reported.
Yeah, no one wants to address the fact that is your freedom to experiment with your consciousness. Like, hey, if you want to have gay marriage, go for it. If you want to have traditional, go for it. If you want to have an abortion, go for it. If you don't want an abortion, go for it. If you want to smoke pot, go for it. If you don't want to, go for it. But it's all about, it's not just drugs. It's just in general. Like, everyone fuck off. If you're not hurting anyone and you're staying on your property and in the privacy of your own home, whether it's you want to try heroin or have an orgy or just say a prayer, whatever it is, man, it's like, that is your freedom to do. Like, everyone fuck off. If you start hurting people, breaking laws, being an asshole, well, then there's a problem. But
that's right. I mean, it's in the drug scenario, in drug reporting, it's just never reported like that.
Yeah.
I've never seen it reported like that. I'm never quoted, and I've not seen Terence McKenna's quotes in the mainstream media that align similarly, or anyone else's. So it's another sort of, journalists becoming organs of the war on drugs. They're not reporting the facts of the war on drugs, what it's doing to the prison population, how many people the United States is locking up, how little effect it's having on. It's a root cause, the war on drugs, of the number of deaths, because it's the actual fact you're fighting a war on people who are taking drugs means they're not getting harm reduction information.
Yeah.
So no wonder there's so many overdose deaths. So they're not reporting that at all in that manner, and they're not providing the facts. They're not even reporting currently how many people are challenging this, and there's a lot being challenged. So a lot of people challenging it. So if they're going to actually write about the war on drugs, you've got to balance it with, people who oppose the war on drugs say this, and this. But I hardly ever see that. Then they're demonising drug users, which is just ridiculous, and it's blatant. And then they completely, censor, never ever report this alternative vision, this perspective that it's my mind. It doesn't belong to the state. It's my property. It's my consciousness, not yours. I can do anything I want with my consciousness, and you can't intrude as the state, because if I haven't got the freedom to do what I want with my own consciousness, I don't have any freedom.
Yeah,
you're intruding on the most inalienable freedom I have got, which is the freedom to explore
your own mind, your own reality.
Yeah, that's right. So, but you don't see that, and it's shocking. That's number 7. Is report actual and factual impact data with respect to the war on drugs. And the last one is don't allow politicians of this or their servants, including the police, to set the agenda and define talking points.
Yeah.
As again, they have a tendency to promote the war on drugs perspective for self-interest. Always be aware that the role of journalism is to report objectively rather than to disseminate propaganda. And that's just basically what I've just said there in a different form of words, that, they're always, politicians always want to be seen to be tough on drugs.
Yeah.
So they've got this propaganda rolling along.
Yeah.
And the media have gone along with it totally for generations. And so they just have to say something about drugs which is horribly right-wing and authoritarian and misinformed, and it will just be repeated, and so it's a good thing. Never really challenged and on the basis of the arguments we've just discussed. And it's a journalist's job to actually explore that ground and to report the factual context of what this politician is saying.
Yeah.
And I argued none of these are outrageously difficult to embrace, at least if the pursuit of truth is the objective. I would also suggest that collectively they almost present a measure of personal integrity for any journalist who is aware of them. So if a journalist reads those or thinks about all those, everything from, the drugs aren't killing people, they're not getting up and stabbing people to death, it's the use of drugs. Report the details, what was the drug, report the relative harms of these drugs, including alcohol, so that you're conveying contextual information and truth, reality, not a distortion of reality. Tag line for people who are desperately in need of information, like a PSA.
Yeah.
Don't just take police figures or information as though it's automatically correct, because it isn't. Have a bit of personal integrity and conscience about how you're spinning your stories with deliriums and so forth. Report the impact data if you're actually doing drug policy. Report the truthful impact data. The imprisonment, the overdose, what's causing it, who drug dealers actually are, as opposed to this fallacy of they're all Dr. Evil.
E-man, yeah.
And just stop perpetuating the talking points that are pushed by individual politicians who see it as a vote catcher to actually promote draconian, even worse than draconian drug laws.
Yeah.
And all that boils down to is to report drugs like you would report the action in a baseball game or a football game.
Exactly. Just objectively,
fact check.
Like the weather. Just make it the weather.
Yeah. Pull out the facts.
Whatever it is, add
whatever information you can which relates to it, which has got a factual basis. And just stop rolling along, because what you're doing as journalists by doing this is killing people. You can't say, I'm just reporting it. No, you're not just reporting it. You're not reporting truth. You have got blood on your hands, you guys out there, if you're watching this video.
Yeah.
Everything we've just covered over the last 20 minutes, if you're not thinking about these and you're not actually practicing some of these codes in your drug reporting, you're guilty. You're not responsible for a lot of the pain, misery, and death, because you're not fighting back against the causes of it, which are ignorance, drug laws which are creating misery and pain and locking people up ridiculously and driving everything underground, keeping people ignorant, totally unaware of of what the proper doses are, what the onset times are, what the relative harms are. You're not reporting any of this because you're too busy pushing propaganda for a sort of from a perspective which is proven to be completely demented for any sane person. Stop doing it.
Yeah.
Stop it. Wash the blood off your hands and start reporting properly, please.
Yeah.
Because you're guilty here as much as the politicians if you're not doing that.
Yeah. And they're probably, they're pressured not to report anything outside the status quo. Like, hey, do you want to keep your job? Because a lot of these guys, it's not that they're manipulative. I'm going to peddle propaganda. A lot of them are just boring motherfuckers like you and me who've got a kid, a wife, they got to pay their mortgage. And they're like, hey, if I write this story and I generate this number of clicks, I get my paycheck. I don't want to rock the cradle. And maybe it is propaganda, maybe it's not, but my wife's pregnant and I need to pay for daycare. Like a lot of these guys, it kind of sucks because it's just like, they're not necessarily for or against it.
They don't give a shit. I mean, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
I said we started with the Nuremberg trials. I mean, I work in this gas chamber.
Yeah,
I have to feed the kids.
I'm just working the gas chamber. I'm just driving the train. You're right. There's a mob mentality. I mean, and whether
it's a group thing, and it's
well, it's the same thing.
They may go home and they may go home to the wife and kids, but the day's work has been filthy business.
Yes.
And no, they don't have to do it. I wouldn't write this shit.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I wouldn't write I couldn't, a lot of stuff I wouldn't write, but certainly wouldn't be writing material which I knew was killing people indirectly.
Yeah. No, you're
which
absolutely
was perpetuating
right.
Ignorance, which was promoting lies and filth that was getting people locked up and destroying families, and I couldn't do that. And if you're doing that as a journalist, you need to be having a damn good look at yourself.
You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. That's the same thing. Yeah, the same thing happens with cancel culture. You have people that won't speak their mind, whether it's about drugs or whether it's about whatever, because they're so afraid that the mob is going to come and fuck you, you're out of a job. And again, the same thing. It's these poor saps who are like, dude, I've got a kid, a wife, I got to pay off my new car, and it's all right. I won't. So it's whether it's not typing or putting
it. Where does it start? What if your boss said, you know what? I don't like. What if give me a right-wing paper in New York? I don't know what they are. A Republican paper. And what if your boss said, "Go. I really don't like the New York Times as being too successful. Go and poison the editor of the New York Times."
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you say, no? Yeah, I'll do that. I've got my wife and kids, and I've got my car and my mortgage. Hopefully, you'd say no. Well, why is it okay to indirectly kill people with this type of reporting that the vast majority of you, the journalist, why is it okay to indirectly kill people and not challenge your boss and not say, you know what, I can't write this, Mr. Editor, because it's just propaganda, it's lies, and it's killing people. Well, take the code of practice and slap it on the editor's desk and say, I've been reading this, boss. Yeah. And you know what? He's absolutely right. We can't do this anymore. Yeah. Have you done that? I don't think you have, actually. Yeah. Well, maybe you should do that. And explain to the editor that you've had enough. Talk to your colleagues. But don't do nothing. Don't go back into work tomorrow morning and produce the same old shit that's going to, keep people in the dark who need the information, who need the truth. That's going to maintain the status quo of a war on drugs, which is a disaster. And causes untold human misery right across the world. Don't carry on perpetuating that because the blood is on your hands if you do.
You're right. I mean, we've seen a couple times in recent history when people do stand up for what they believe in. Ed Snowden and Chelsea Manning, and what happens? You end up in a military prison or ostracized from your country.
But the journalists aren't going to end up in their position. And given the implications, do you want to live with yourself? I couldn't do this. I couldn't be a journalist for a newspaper that was, I couldn't write the stuff, write anything that I knew was actually killing loads and loads of people indirectly. So, you've got to look at yourself and at some point decide who you want to be, what person you are, and define yourself.
Yeah.
I suggest the time to do that is now.
It is. I think that's the benefit of where we are with technology, though. I mean, just an example, like Joe Rogan podcast, like he doesn't have to worry about some boss saying, don't push that story. I think we're going to see a change in people creating their own things, even like this little tiny podcast. I'm allowed to say whatever I want. I can have on military veterans and we can talk about war stories. And then the next day I can have on Dominic Milton Trott and we can talk about psychedelics. Like, I think a lot of it is you got to take control of your own platform.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have a boss.
Yeah, but in turn they control you.
Well, yeah, that's the danger of
the algorithm.
Well, not the algorithm, but also cancel culture. That's the problem. Luckily there are people like Rogan that when they try to cancel him, he's like, fuck off. But there are a lot of smaller channels that like you can get bullied into, you're going to get.
I mean, that's why I'm here, because, you're small, but I've got a chance to tell the truth.
Exactly.
And you don't censor anything. So,
I don't censor.
And if half a dozen people see, that's half a dozen people who maybe haven't thought about these issues before.
Yeah. Well, that's
journalists sees this, might give him things to think about that it's never crossed his mind in the past, and he might, maybe he's got a point here.
Yeah. That's why that's why I try to have on as many different types of people as possible, because if you only have on one type of person, and there's nothing wrong with it. There are military podcasts, there are fun podcasts, there are weed podcasts, but when you limit yourself to one subject, you're ultimately going to only get that own crowd, and it's going to be an echo chamber, and no one's going to step outside their beliefs.
Yeah.
That's why I try to have on people that challenge my beliefs. I try to have on everyone. I have on weightlifters, I have on comedians, I have on Dominic Milton Trott. Tomorrow I'm having on my buddy that used to drive a drone for the Air Force. On Sunday or Saturday I'm having on some Delta Force guys. So by having on everyone, I hope that the audiences overlap, and at the very least you are exposed to point of views that even if you don't agree with, and even if it doesn't change your mind, at least you're kind of just seeing different angles. Like, okay, yeah. I get it. So who knows? We'll see in time if this podcast grows.
You can see what happened. I know it's been a different one to normal, but you started it by talking about Trump.
I did, and I did it on purpose. I wanted to switch it up. But that's why I like this. Is I want it to always be different. I don't want someone to tune in to hear what they want.
Been different to the others we've done, but
that's good.
I've enjoyed it.
Switch it up.
I've enjoyed it. You've got me worked up a few times. I've got myself worked up, and I've been reading your things, thinking, "What, you write this?
It's good. This is get passionate. There's nothing wrong with getting passionate and getting emotional. Keep your head, be mature, be tolerant, be civil, but get your heart rate going. Get jacked up. That's what life is about, man. You got to talk about what
it's not been the right. I've just said when you weren't here that it's the hottest day of the year here today.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm bright red. I'm hot.
So you've
triggered me to
I'm sorry. I've got my air. It's hot here, but I've got my air conditioner on. I've got the fan on. So
we don't need air con here. It's England.
Yeah. Well, that's why I always keep it air conditioned in this room for the podcast, so that I can stay calm, cool, and collected. Because otherwise, I would be beat red, just screaming, beating on the table. But it's good. It's good. I'd rather. I think it was Hunter S. Thompson that said, if it gets your blood going, then if it gets your blood going, it's good for you. It might kill you, but it's good for you. So whether it's drugs or whether it's music or whether it's sex, if it gets you riled up and it gets you, well, then it's probably
still good. Not. I'm gonna go and have a cold shower now to try and cool down.
Good.
Really.
Well, hey, next, I will take the blame, and I don't apologize. Next episode, we'll go back to calm, cool, and collected. But it's good.
Go back to Dominic Milton Trott. The wild man Trott.
Yeah. No, hey, man, I like it. It's you got to get out of your comfort zone. It has. It's been an hour and a half, so we'll wrap this one up. I'm gonna be on vacation for like the next 2 weeks, but let's get back to doing them regularly because you're a guest that I thoroughly enjoy.
Okay, we'll get together, and I'm hoping to get out of the country as well, like in a few weeks. But
I think
touch wood, it may not happen. Okay, thanks for having me on.
Dominic Milton Trott, author of the Drug Users Bible, my friend, and my new I don't even know what word I'm looking for. My partner in arguing. I loved it. I loved every second of it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Brilliant. Peace.